This is a story about something that happened to me and my wife Jenna 2 years ago. To this day, we still have trouble sleeping through the night, and I don't think we will ever truly feel safe in our own home again. It was our first New Year's Eve as parents. Our son Liam was only 3 months old. If you're a parent, you know that the party lifestyle pretty much dies the second you bring the baby home. We used to go out to bars or huge house parties on New Year's. But that year, our big plan was just to try and stay awake until midnight. Liam had been colicky for weeks, screaming his lungs out every night from 6 o'clock PA to 9 o'clock PM. But that night, by some miracle, he went down easily around 8:30. We put him in his crib in the nursery, which is on the second floor at the back of the house. We have one of those high-end video monitors that connects to an app on your phone, but it also has a dedicated handheld screen. We set the screen up on the coffee table in the living room, right next to the bowl of chips and dip. The living room was cozy. We had the TV volume low, watching the pre-show for the ball drop in Times Square. Honestly, we were both dozing off by 10:30. The house was quiet except for the TV and the occasional car driving by outside. Every 10 minutes or so, I'd glance at the monitor. It was in night vision mode, so everything was black and white and slightly grainy. I could see Liam swaddled up, his chest rising and falling rhythmically. It was the most peaceful he'd looked in weeks. Around 11:50 p.m., the anticipation on TV started building up. The hosts were shouting, the music was getting louder, and the energy was high. I grabbed the remote and turned the volume up just a little bit, wanting to feel some of that excitement. Jenna went to the kitchen to pour us 2 glasses of sparkling cider since she was breastfeeding and didn't want alcohol. 10 minutes to midnight, the TV announced. Outside, the neighborhood was starting to get noisy. We live in a suburb where people take fireworks seriously. A few pops went off down the street. I looked at the monitor. Liam didn't move. He's out cold, I told Jenna as she came back in. I hope the big fireworks don't wake him up. If he wakes up, you're going in there, she joked, sitting next to me. 11:59 p.m. The countdown began. 10, 9, 8, we counted along, clinked our glasses at 0. Immediately, our neighborhood erupted. It sounded like a war zone. Someone 2 houses down must have bought professional-grade mortar, because the booms were shaking our windows. It was loud. Really loud. I immediately looked at the monitor, flinching, expecting to see Liam screaming and thrashing, but he wasn't. He was perfectly still. Wow, Jenna said, looking at the screen over my shoulder. He must be really tired. He didn't even twitch. I stared at the screen. Yeah, I said. That's lucky. Another massive boom shook the house. The dog next door started barking like crazy. On the screen. Liam remained statue still. A weird feeling hit my stomach. It wasn't relief anymore. It was confusion. Liam was a light sleeper. He woke up if the floorboards creaked. How was he sleeping through explosions that were rattling the glass in the frames? I picked up the monitor to get a closer look. The image was clear. Baby in the crib. Still sleeping 10 primera sa. W.A. Italiano. In the top right corner of the monitor screen, there is a small digital clock that displays the current time. It read 11:42 p.m. I looked at the cable box on our TV stand. It read 12 to 4 a.m. My blood ran cold. The image on the screen wasn't live, it was frozen. It had been frozen for over 20 minutes. Jenna, the monitor, it's frozen. She looked at me, confused. What the time? It says 11:42. He's not sleeping through the noise. We aren't watching him. I didn't wait for her to answer. I dropped the monitor on the couch and sprinted for the stairs. I heard Jenna right behind me gasping. I took the stairs 2 at a time. The hallway was dark. I reached the nursery door and threw it open. I expected to hear crying. I expected to see him sleeping. Instead, I felt a cold draft. I flipped the light switch. The first thing I saw was the curtains blowing violently into the room. The window, which we always kept locked, was wide open. The screen had been cut and pushed out. It was lying on the lawn below. I ran to the crib. It was empty. The swaddled blanket was there, unraveled and tossed to the side. But Liam was gone. He's gone. I screamed. I don't think I've ever made a sound like that in my life. Jenna ran into the room, saw the empty crib, and collapsed to the floor, screaming his name. I ran to the window and looked out. The street was dark, lit only by the flashes of fireworks, still going off in the distance. The celebratory noise felt mocking now. While we were sitting downstairs clinking glasses and watching a frozen image of our sleeping son, someone had climbed a ladder or a trellis, cut our screen, and taken him. I pulled my phone out and dialed 911. I was shouting so loud that the operator had to tell me to stop so she could understand the address. The next hour was a blur of blue lights and police radios. They set up a perimeter immediately. The officer in charge told us that whoever did this likely used the noise of the early fireworks to mask the sound of the window sliding open. They knew we were distracted by the holiday. They found footprints in the snow in our backyard leading to the side gate, which was left unlocked. I felt like I was going to throw up. I paced the living room holding Jenna, thinking about how I had looked at that monitor at 11:50 and 11:55 thinking he was safe. I was looking at a ghost image while my son was being carried out into the cold. About 2 hours later, the radio on the officer's shoulder crackled. Suspect detained. We have the infant. He appears unharmed. Jenna and I both burst into tears. They caught her 4 blocks away. It was a woman in her late 40s. She was walking down the sidewalk, humming to herself, holding Liam wrapped in a thick coat. A patrol car had stopped her just because it looked odd for someone to be walking a baby in freezing temperatures at 2:00 a.m. On New Year's, when they approached her, she claimed it was her grandson, but she couldn't give his name or date of birth correctly. We found out later that she lived in the neighborhood. She had lost her own child years ago and had suffered a mental breakdown. She had been watching our house for weeks, learning our schedule, and noticing the nursery window. She timed it for the fireworks, knowing the noise would cover her tracks. We got Liam back that night. He was cold and hungry, but otherwise okay. We didn't sleep for days. We actually sold that house 3 months later. We couldn't stay in a place where someone had watched us like that. We threw that video monitor in the trash. Now we just keep the nursery door open, and one of us is always awake. Technology is great, but it can lie to you. And sometimes the scariest things happen when you think you're safest, right under your nose. Before we dive into the next story, if you're visiting our channel for the first time, do you want to forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on the bell icon to stay updated with our upcoming scary stories. I've never been a huge fan of parties. I'm the kind of guy who stands near the wall, checking the time every 10 minutes. But it was New Year's Eve 2019, and my roommates Sam and Jared had practically dragged me to this house party in the suburbs of Chicago. The house was packed, the bass was rattling the windows, and the air was thick with the smell of perfume. I didn't know many people there. It was mostly friends of friends. I was standing by the kitchen island, feeling out of place, just waiting for midnight so I could politely leave at around 11:45 p.m. The music cut out abruptly. The silence was jarring. The chatter in the room died down as heavy pounding echoed from the front door. Police, open up. Voice bellowed from outside. My stomach dropped. I hadn't done anything wrong, but that instinctual fear of authority kicked in instantly. Everyone froze. Sam, the host, looked pale as he walked to the door and opened it. A police officer stepped in. He looked legitimate. Dark uniform, badge glinting under the hallway light, utility belt heavy with gear. He was a big guy, tall and broad-shouldered. I had never seen him before. He wasn't a local cop I recognized. He scanned the room with a flashlight, the beam cutting through the dim lighting. It landed right on me. "Is there a David Miller here?" he barked. My heart started hammering against my ribs. I felt every pair of eyes in the room turn toward me. My throat went dry. That's me," I said. The officer marched through the crowd. People parted like the Red Sea, looking at me with a mix of pity and curiosity. "Step forward," the officer commanded. What did I do? "Primera, stamimerd," my hands shaking. "We have a warrant for your arrest regarding an incident involving a hit and run on December 20th. "Turn around." "Hit and run," I shouted, panic rising. "I haven't hit anyone y driver Corolla. There must be a mistake. Tell it to the judge. Turn around now." He grabbed my shoulder with a grip like iron and spun me around. He pulled a pair of handcuffs from his belt. The sound of them ratcheting tight around my wrists was the loudest thing in the room. It hurt. He did it tight. "You have the right to remain silent," he recited, reciting the Miranda retites, as he shoved me toward the door. I looked back at my friends. Sam and Jared were standing there, mouths open. They looked terrified. I pleaded with them with my eyes to do something, to call someone, but they just stood there. I felt utterly betrayed. The officer marched me out into the freezing night air. The wind cut right through my thin shirt. "Officer, please, check my license." I was at work on the 20th. I begged as we walked down the driveway. "Quiet," he snapped. We reached the curb. I expected to see a squad car with flashing lights. Instead, the street was empty, dark, and silent. "Where's your car?" I asked, confused. Before he could answer, a large black SUV with tinted windows rolled slowly down the street. It didn't have markings on the side, but it had red and blue lights flashing behind the grille. The officer who arrested me seemed to tense up. He stopped walking. The SUV pulled up right next to us. The window rolled down. A man was driving. I couldn't see his face clearly, just a silhouette in a dark uniform. "I've got him," the driver said. His voice was rough. "Prisoner transport. Put him in the back." The officer holding me hesitated. For a split second, he looked confused, maybe even scared. He looked at the SUV, then back at the house, then at me. "Officer," I said, shivering. "Get in," the arresting officer said quickly. His voice had lost its authority. He sounded nervous. He opened the back door of the SUV and practically shoved me inside. "Wait, seatbelt." I started, but he slammed the door shut. I watched through the tinted glass as the officer who arrested me turned and walked back toward the house. He didn't look like a cop anymore. He looked like a guy running away from a crime scene. The SUV accelerated instantly. I was sliding around on the leather seat because my hands were cuffed behind my back. The car smelled awful, like a wet dog and antiseptic. "Sir," I called out to the front, "where are we taking me?" "Which precinct?" The driver didn't answer. He was driving fast, way over the speed limit. We blew through a stop sign. "Hey, you just ran a stop sign," I yelled. He turned onto a road that led away from the city, toward the old industrial district. "Sir, the station is downtown." The driver finally looked in the rearview mirror. His eyes were lit by the dashboard lights. He wasn't wearing a police hat. He was wearing a dirty baseball cap, and he was smiling. "We aren't going to the station, David," he said softly. My blood ran cold. "What?" you said. "I saw your friend bring you out." The driver interrupted. "Nice of him to package you up for me, handcuffed and everything. Saves me so much work, my friend," I hissed. "That was a cop." The driver laughed. It was a three-heckin' laugh. That wasn't a copped kid. That was a costume. I've been watching that house for 2 hours, waiting for someone to walk out alone. I got lucky. He walked out in chains. The reality hit me like a physical blow. The officer inside the house, the way Sam and Jared looked, the lack of a squad car. It was a prank. My friends had hired a stripper or an actor to scare me. That's why the first guy looked nervous when this SUV showed up. He thought this was the real police. He got scared of getting caught impersonating an officer, so he handed me over to the first authority figure he saw to get rid of the evidence. I wasn't in a police transport. I was in a stranger's car, handcuffed, heading into the darkness. "Let me out," I screamed, kicking the door. It was a joke. It was just a joke. "It's not a joke to me," the man said, clicking the lock button on his door. He reached under his seat and pulled out something that looked metallic. "Now sit back and enjoy the ride. The new year is just starting." We were miles from the house now. The street lights had disappeared. It was just the headlights and the endless rows of cornfields and abandoned warehouses. I started hyperventilating. I tugged at the handcuffs until my wrists bled, but they were real police-grade cuffs. The actor had used real cuffs. The car slowed down and turned onto a gravel road that led into a dense patch of woods near the river. "Please," I sobbed. "I have money. Take my wallet." "I don't want your money," he said, putting the car in park and killing the engine. The darkness swallowed us whole. "I just want to play." He opened his door. The interior light didn't come on. He must have disabled it. I heard his heavy boots crunching on the gravel as he walked around to my side of the car. I squeezed my eyes shut and curled my legs up to my chest, preparing to kick as soon as the door opened. The door flew open. Cold air rushed in. He reached for me and I kicked out with everything I had. My heel connected with his chest, knocking the wind out of him. He stumbled back, cursing. I scrambled out of the car, falling face first onto the frozen dirt. I couldn't use my hands to break the fall, so my nose took the impact. Pain exploded in my face, but adrenaline numbed it instantly. "You little brat," he roared, scrambling to his feet. I got up and ran. I ran blindly into the woods. Without my arms for balance, I was stumbling, crashing into trees and tearing my face on low-hanging branches. "I have a flashlight," he yelled from behind me. "You can't hide." A beam of light cut through the trees, sweeping left and right. I threw myself behind a thick oak tree, pressing my body into the rough bark. My breath was coming in ragged gasps that sounded too loud in the silent woods. I heard him walking. He was slow, methodical. "Come on out, David. You're still wearing the bracelets. You can't go far." He was right. I couldn't climb. I couldn't fight. I was essentially a trussed-up animal. I looked around desperately. About 10 feet away, there was an old rusted drainage pipe half buried in the ground. It looked too small for a person, but it was my only chance. I waited for the flashlight beam to swing the other way. Then I dove for the pipe. I wiggled inside, feet first. It was tight, claustrophobic, and filled with freezing muck. I shimmied back as far as I could go, the smell of rot filling my nose. I lay there in the dark, shivering uncontrollably. Footsteps stopped right outside the pipe. Hey. Light. 5 minutes, just listening. I didn't move a muscle. I didn't blink. Eventually, he kicked the side of the pipe, causing a deafening clang that made me scream internally. Then he walked away. I stayed in that pipe until the sun came up. When I finally crawled out, half frozen and covered in filth, I walked for an hour until I found a gas station. The clerk almost had a heart attack when he saw me. The police arrived and cut the cuffs off. Later at the station, my friends were in the lobby crying. They had been trying to call me all night. They explained everything. The first officer was indeed a friend of a friend, an actor. The plan was to arrest me, put me in his car for 5 minutes, and then drive me around the block back to the party for a laugh. But when that black SUV pulled up with lights, the actor panicked. He thought he was getting busted by a real undercover unit. He handed me over to save himself. The man in the SUV? They found the vehicle abandoned a week later. It was stolen. The inside was lined with plastic sheeting. They never found him. I don't talk to Sam or Jared anymore. I moved to a different state. Back in 2018, I was a junior in college, living in a gloomy garden-level apartment in Ohio. It was one of those cheap complexes where the walls were paper-thin and the hallways always smelled like damp carpet. Because I was taking extra winter courses and working a part-time retail job, I decided not to fly home to California for the holidays. It was just too expensive, and I needed the hours at work. So, when New Year's Eve rolled around, I was completely alone. My 2 roommates had gone back to their families, leaving the apartment dead silent. Around 7:00 p.m., I was heating a frozen pizza and trying to ignore the sounds of parties starting in the distance. I wasn't really sad, just bored. Then there was a heavy knock on my front door. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I looked through the peephole. It was my neighbor from across the hall, a guy named Arthur. Arthur was probably in his late 50s, a balding man who always wore thick wool sweaters. We had only spoken in passing, usually just a nod at the mailboxes or a mumbled hello while taking out the trash. He seemed harmless, just a bit socially awkward, and very lonely. I opened the door. "Hey, Arthur. What's up?" He shifted his weight from foot to foot, looking nervous. "Hello, Mark. I made a roast for tonight, a New Year's tradition. But I realized I made far too much for just one person. I saw your lights were on and figured you might be alone, too. Would you like to join me? It's fresh out of the oven." Honestly, the smell wafting from his open door across the hall was incredible. It smelled like rosemary and garlic, way better than my frozen pizza. I hesitated for a second, but I felt bad for the guy. He was clearly trying to be nice, and I didn't have any other plans. "Sure," I said. "Let me just grab my phone." I locked my door and followed him into his apartment. The layout was the same as mine, but the vibe was totally different. My place was messy with textbooks and video games. His was disturbingly neat. There was almost no furniture, just a small table with 2 chairs, a brown leather couch, and no TV. The only light came from a dim lamp in the corner and the kitchen light. "Sit," he urged, gesturing to the small wooden table. He had already set the table perfectly. 2 plates, silverware lined up straight, and a bottle of soda. "As primeras a te don." I heard the distinct click of the deadbolt locking behind me. I turned around. Arthur was standing by the door, smiling. "Just to keep the draft out," he said. He sat across from me and started serving the food. The roast actually tasted amazing, but the conversation was strange from the start. He didn't ask normal questions like, "What are you studying?" or "How is work?" Instead, he asked, "So, your roommates are gone for the whole week, right?" "Yeah," I said, chewing slowly. "They'll be back on the 4th. And your parents? They know you're here alone." "We texted earlier." I lied. I hadn't actually texted them yet. "Why?" "Oh, just making conversation," Arthur said, staring at me without blinking. It's rare to see a young man so isolated. He poured me a glass of soda. I didn't drink it. I just pushed the food around my plate. The atmosphere was getting heavy. The silence in the room was suffocating, only broken by the occasional pop of a firework going off outside. About 20 minutes in, Arthur dropped his fork. It clattered loudly against the plate. "I have a surprise for dessert," he said, his voice dropping an octave. "I made it specifically for you." "I should probably head back soon to call my mom," I said, starting to stand up. "Sit down," he said. It wasn't a request. His face had lost that nervous, friendly look. It was completely blank. "I really have to go," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I said, sit down," he snapped. At that moment, a cell phone started ringing. It wasn't mine, and it wasn't coming from Arthur's pocket. It was coming from the back bedroom. Arthur's eyes widened, and he looked towards the bedroom door with genuine panic. He stood up abruptly. "Stay right here. Do not move." He hurried down the short hallway into the bedroom and closed the door. I knew this was my chance. I didn't wait. As soon as that door clicked shut, I bolted for the front door. I grabbed the deadbolt, but it wouldn't turn. It was a double-cylinder deadbolt, the kind that needs a key from the inside. I felt a cold wave of shock wash over me. My apartment didn't have this kind of lock. He must have installed it himself. I looked around, frantically for a key. There was a small bowl on a side table, empty. From the bedroom, I heard Arthur's voice, muffled, but angry. He wasn't talking on the phone. He was yelling at someone. "You ruined Italiana. You were supposed to be quiet." My heart hammered against my ribs. I realized I couldn't go out the front door. I ran into the kitchen. We were on the garden level, so the windows were at ground level outside. I tried to slide the kitchen window up, but it was jammed. I looked closely and saw screws driven into the frame. He had sealed the windows shut. I heard the bedroom door handle turn. I panicked. I grabbed the heavy soda bottle from the table and ducked behind the kitchen island, clutching it like a club. Arthur walked back into the living room. "Mark," he called out. His voice was sickeningly sweet again. "Where did you go? Desert is ready." I peeked around the corner. He was holding a roll of silver duct tape in one hand and a box cutter in the other. He began checking the corners of the living room. He was between me and the front door, but he was moving toward the bathroom. I needed a distraction. I looked at the counter next to me. There was the roast on the heavy ceramic platter. I took a breath, grabbed the platter, and hurled it as hard as I could toward the bathroom door. It shattered against the wall with a massive crash. Arthur spun around toward the noise, yelling, "What are you doing?" I didn't answer. I sprinted from the kitchen, charging straight at him before he could fully turn back. I slammed my shoulder into his chest, knocking him backward. He tripped over his own feet and hit the floor hard, the box cutter sliding away across the linoleum. I didn't stop to fight him. I scrambled to the front door, remembering the key. I looked down at him. He was groaning, trying to get up. I saw something shiny clipped to his belt loop. Keys. I dove for him. He grabbed my ankle, his grip surprisingly strong. He cut out his shoe, catching me in the ribs, winding me. Primera kicked back, stomping my heel down onto his wrist until he yelled and let go. I ripped the keys off his belt loop, scrambled up, and jammed the key into the deadbolt. "You can't leave!" Arthur screamed. He was getting up, blood dripping from his nose where he'd hit the floor. The lock clicked. I threw the door open and practically fell out into the hallway. I didn't even go to my apartment. I ran straight up the stairs, out of the building, and into the cold night. I didn't stop running until I reached the 24-hour gas station 3 blocks away. I called the police from the clerk's phone, shaking uncontrollably. When the police arrived at the apartment complex, Arthur was gone. His front door was wide open, but what they found inside was enough to make me drop out of school and move back home. In his bedroom, they didn't find another person.